3 disclaimers. One, I don't expect you guys to have all of, or maybe even any of the stuff that I have here today. There's more stuff than just what's on the bed. But I'm a little bit weird that way. Number 2, I'm going to use some words that maybe people don't know what I'm talking about. I will explain what I mean later on in the video. Last thing, check your local laws. I'm not giving you any legal advice in this video. I'm merely talking about what hypothetically you could do if it was legally applicable to your state, your town, because even county to county, laws will change a lot. Alright, so we're going to talk about home defense weaponry a little bit, and here are a few things that at various times have actually played a part in my home defense plan. Now, this one. I got rid of this one first. Baseball bats, they're classic, like they're almost synonymous with home defense. I mean, people all the time will take a baseball bat and think, oh yeah, this is the good home defense weapon. Problem with them, though, is as soon as you get past the range where you're hitting somebody with it and they get inside, it has now become more of a liability than it has become a force multiplier or anything helpful. And yeah, you can deliver short strikes with it, you know, but ultimately, you know, it's more of a liability at grappling ranges, and so I don't particularly want it. Like, at least with an edged weapon, you can do like a draw cut or something. There's really no way to strike with it as effectively as when you get one of those, you know? Now, I will say the good things about it is it's a little less lethal than some of the other stuff that I have here. So that can definitely be very applicable for home defense. There can be situations where you don't want to kill anyone. Now, if I swing it like this to the head, yeah, that's pretty lethal. But, you know, if I give little short jabs or you know, go for the knee or the collarbone or something like that, you're going to have less lethal effects. Still though, I'd rather pick something else. There are other things I can use for less lethal that'll give me more range from my attacker, so in case it doesn't stop them, I still have time to do something else. And, yeah, all in all, I'm just really not too big on the baseball bat for home defense. Another common tool around the house, which is sort of what I'm going for with these first two. This is a hammer, as you can pretty clearly tell. I think pretty much everybody who watches this video is going to have one of these. This isn't actually my personal hammer, this is my grandfather's, but, you know, I've got one at home, and at a time, it had played a part in my home defense plan. Not anymore, because, well, there are purpose-built tools that are better. This is a good weapon in that it's one-handed, but not so great in that it's kind of hard to keep it moving. Like, that... Like, if you know, obviously, you know, doing this with it is pretty easy. That's what it's meant to do. But once you start, you know, trying to use it like a weapon, it becomes a problem. It's also just as much, well, not just as much, it is also a grappling liability, kind of like this, when you get into closer ranges. Anything really that doesn't have something other than just blunt force is gonna be a grappling liability, especially if it's fixed like this is. You know, this is like a solid thing that doesn't, it's not flexible, so fighting over it is going to be an issue. Somebody gets a hold of right here, now we've got to fight for this weapon, and that's not what you want in a self-defense situation, ever. You want to have complete control over your weapon. It does have the benefit of being one-handed as opposed to two-handed, so I could be, you know, pushing someone out of the way while I'm using it, or something like that. That's a big benefit. I can also, you know, I can use my other hand. I can fight how I normally would, more or less, except incorporate a hammer. But I don't like it. I don't like it as much because of the grappling liability, because it isn't purpose-built and therefore is harder to swing. I will give this one credit. This specific hammer, it has a rubber grip, so it's pretty easy to keep a good firm, tight grip on, so that's nice. But, yeah, I'd rather go with something purpose-built. Alright, so, Talking about edged weapons, just some overall factors, pros and cons, right? One big thing is they're going to be scary, and that might sound weird, but I mean, get out of my house versus get out of my house. I don't know about you, but for me, I'm more likely to run away from the guy with the machete. If you can get them out of your house, that's what you want. That's all you need for home defense. You need them to be off your property, and then you can call the police. So it becomes a very useful thing for your weapon to be intimidating. Another good thing about edged weapons, they are good space makers. So if you need something to get you to something better, that's what they're for. Edged weapons are great for creating space because people naturally, when a knife comes flying at them like that, want to go, oh shit, and that creates enough space that maybe you can run and get something more effective. Now, both a pro and a con is that they are lethal. And I can explain more about why that's both a pro and a con when we get to the cons. They are one-handed, so generally. Obviously, you're going to have exceptions to that, like two-handed swords and stuff, but I'm talking about stuff that's common around the house, so they're going to be one-handed, right? You know, knives, machetes, things like that. Pretty common. People have things like that, even if we're talking about kitchen knives, which I don't have an example of here, but you could use one of these to mean a kitchen knife pretty easily. So that kind of thing, going to be one-handed. Now, talking about overall cons. They're going to be very short range, which, you know, I talked about that's a problem because if it doesn't work, they're on top of me already, right? If I have something less lethal or even something lethal that is long range, it gives me more time to try something else if the first thing didn't work, right? As opposed to these things, well, I kind of have to wait until they're right up on me to be able to use them. So, short range is definitely a con. Also, if they're in your reach, that means you're in their reach. So if they have a knife too, that can go really badly. Another issue, the reason that them being lethal is both a pro and a con, well, it's a pro because, I mean, sometimes you're going to have a attacker that lethal force is both justified and what you need to do to stop that situation. But, on the other hand, knives are not like guns. They don't just drop people in the same way that guns generally will if you hit in the right place. Knives take a lot longer. You're kind of torturing people to death when you use a knife to kill them, and that's not what we want for self-defense because we are good people. We want the threat to stop. If the knife does not effectively stop the threat, it's a problem, right? That's why I say knives are space makers, not something that you want to try and sit there and bang it out with the person with. Alright, talking about this machete, right? Now, pros, like I said before, it's scary. It's one-handed. It's slightly longer range than most other edged weapons, which is that's all good. This, until very recently, actually sat by my bed. So this is one of the more recent ones that I'm no longer thinking of as much of a home defense weapon. But I mean, if I'm out in the yard, I'll use this for snake defense. So that's something. But it's not like home defense, like, you know, people attacking you in your home. The reason that I have gotten rid of it is actually because of some recent stuff that I've been doing where I was chopping grapevines with it, and I noticed that once my grip gets a little bit sweaty, or if I'm wearing gloves, or if my grip just isn't exactly perfect and I'm not striking at exactly the right angle, it will shift around in my hand. And that's a problem because that means it's going to be easier to knock it out of my hand. Trust me, I've practiced this stuff a lot. If somebody doesn't have a good grip on something, it holds to reason that that grip is going to be easier to break. Other than that, though, I mean, as far as edged weapons go, this is probably pretty good because it is it does allow me a little bit more range, which means that, you know, there's a little bit more room to mess up. If we get into grappling ranges, I can do a draw cut, which I have said once before, and that's one of those terms I'm talking about that I will define later in the video. Yeah, all in all, I think it's okay, but when we're talking about the cons, that thing about it moving around in my grip, that's too significant of a con for me for this to continue to be an option. Which is unfortunate, because I really like this thing, but nope. I'm going to get pretty deep into sheaths here in a minute, but for right now, I just want you to know nylon is the worst kind of sheath or holster that you can have. And I'll explain why later in this video. Now, this has a rubber grip. That's a big pro because, you know, my hand gets wet from sweat or some other bodily fluid in the course of defending myself. It won't slip around. It's scarier than some of the other knives that I have, but you know, it's not extremely well made. So this could still potentially be something that might sit near your bed just to make you feel comfortable, but it suffers from all the same problems, right? You need someone to be right up on top of you, and I don't want that. In a home defense situation, I want to keep as much space between me and my attacker as possible. I mean, we're already going to be in a pretty tight, confined space, because houses are generally fairly small, at least the ones I live in. But I would want to keep at least some space in between me and my attacker, right? If we're out having a street fight, it's kind of a different context. Ironically, there's more open space, and we're probably going to be right on top of each other, whereas in my house, it's an unknown threat, and I'm having to defend other people, right? Because there are other people who inhabit my house. So I don't want to be tied up with one attacker and have a second one go murder my grandparents or my mom or whoever I'm staying with at this point, right? Huge issue. So, that's sort of why really, really short-range weapons like knives are less relevant to my home defense plan, and this isn't something that I can legally carry around with me, so it's not something I'm likely to just have on me whenever the door gets kicked in, and so that's a problem. And the knives that you will see as part of my home defense plan later in this video that still currently are part of my home defense plan are knives that I just carry anyway. Talking about just carrying anyway. This knife, this folding knife, these are super common. A lot of people just keep these in their pockets. I used to. I'm not so much with it anymore because they're cheap and they're pretty likely to break. And that's okay when we're talking about opening boxes or cutting rope or whatever. If the blade breaks, it's not that big a deal. If I'm fighting, that's a much bigger deal. Especially when I say break, what I really mean is this liner lock will break, and the knife will do that. That's not acceptable. I can't have one of my hands taken out in the middle of a fight like that, so absolutely not. This knife, not even an option, in my opinion. Now, for some people, it may be their only option, and in that case, probably better than nothing, but even that is kind of debatable depending on it. If it's a really high quality one, should be okay, but still, I'd much rather have it fixed. Again, very brief moment on the sheath. This is a Kydex sheath, that is a type of plastic. This is the type of sheath and holster that I recommend is Kydex, and I will get more into why that is in a moment. This knife, it's pretty cheap, it's fairly sturdy, it's a useful tool, it came sharp. Those are all really good things. Now, it also came with a grip that my hand would just slide all around on it, and that was no good. Like, I had multiple times where my hand slid up onto the blade, and that's really not what you want, because I almost cut myself really badly. So I had to attach some, do some work to the handle, and now it works better. But I just want something that I know from experience my hand isn't going to slip around on as much as this. And so that's why I don't choose this one. But the sheath is a huge pro for it, and I wish that I had a Kydex sheath for the knives I do pick. Alright, so talking about sheaths real quick. I have 3 examples of sheaths here. One is nylon with duct tape wrapped around it. That was just me messing around. One is leather, and one is Kydex that I was talking about before. Now, I have it in this order for a reason. I'm going from worst to best. Now, this is what I would consider worst. Like I said, Kydex, nylon is no good because it doesn't hold your weapon securely. Look at this. That's an issue. Now, leather will do that too, but you can get leather that will hold it more securely than the Kydex will. But anytime that I hold this and don't apply any pressure to it, it comes right out. Now, with the leather, I have to shake it a little bit. That's a good thing, right? Because it means that it is in there a little more securely than it is with the nylon. Now with the Kydex, I can really, and it'll come out, but not super easily, right? I can shake it a fair amount and it's not coming out of there. So, issue with this Kydex sheath is this clip. It will, honestly, it'll probably sometimes when you draw it, the whole sheath will come off because of the design of this clip. But that's not an issue with Kydex so much as specifically an issue with the design of this sheath. Now, even if that does happen, it really doesn't take very much for me to put my thumb on there and flick it and have the sheath off. And so, even if it does come off my belt, it's still, honestly, I'd rather that than get tackled and my knife fall out. Now, this is the knife I carry every day, and it's in a leather sheath. That's because it's a knife that is primarily a tool for me. Like, this is more of a tool than a weapon. I use this to open boxes all the time. I've never once used it as a weapon. More of a tool than a weapon. However, it is something that doesn't, I've tested falling with this on my belt, and it generally doesn't come out of the sheath. And so, I think it's high percentage enough that it's okay. At some point, I'll probably get a Kydex sheath for this, but for right now, this is okay. Hi guys, so I'm editing at 4 a.m. and I realized that nobody wants to listen to me talk about weapons for 30 minutes on end, so I decided to split it into 2 sections. The first section was talking about the weapons that used to be in my plan. The second section is going to be talking about weapons that are actually currently in it.